So let's dive in, and we do this every week before the Browns game. We match up our offense with our opponent's defense. We did that yesterday. Today, we're looking at the matchup of Miami's offense versus the Browns' defense. And just for context, here are some numbers. Points per game, Miami, 10th in the league. Points allowed per game, the Browns, 24th in the league. Not a good matchup there. Yards per game, same story, really. Miami is 5th in the league in total yards per game. The Browns, middle of the pack, stopping the opponent, 15th in the league. This is where it gets interesting. Passing yards per game, the Dolphins are 2nd, only to Kansas City. Passing defense, passing yards allowed per game, the Browns, 15th. Running yards per game, the Dolphins are 29th in the league. They do not come at you with much of a run game.
Yeah.
The Browns stopping the run, not very good against it. 22nd in the league when it comes to stopping the run. When you put all those numbers into the blender, Tyvis, I'll let you start here. What do you make of this matchup, Miami's offense against the Browns defense?
Well, I'm going to tell you like this, Jay. It's one of those matchups where you've seen how the last time the Browns played against the Bengals, they decided to go, instead of having Perion Winfrey, they set him down, had Isaac Rochelle because they wanted that extra pass rush guy.
Right.
I think they have to use that same type of recipe because you think of their wide receivers, you think of our DBs. On paper, at the beginning of this season, we're like, oh, Denzel Ward is great. G. New's coming to his own. And we've got either A.J. Greedy, whoever you want to put in at the nickel position. We look really good in the secondary. And as this season has went on, they've been up and down in games.
Sure.
Denzel Ward coming back, he needs to be healthy for this game. This is one of those games that we've paid him this money. This is a game why we paid him that money, so he can match up against somebody like Tyreek Hill.
Right.
However, I would say he's not the key factor. The key factor into this game will be the pass rush because Miami's, the way that they run their offense, which I'm going to draw up later, they run their routes so deep that if we're running zone, our coverage has to drop back to accommodate for how deep these routes are.
And that takes time to unfold.
Right. So now the pass rush has to get there because if it doesn't, the check down is what's going to be wide open. And since all the defenders are all the way down the field, the check down is going to get you 10 yards.
Are you advocating more blitzing? Because earlier this week when he was on the show, Leroy Horde said, do not blitz.
I would blitz if I know that they're going to get home. If they're going to get home.
Yeah, of course you would.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you never blitz with the idea that you're not going to get home.
That's my point. Are we a good blitz team is the question.
We don't blitz much.
When we do, is it effective?
We tend to get home when we bring extra guys.
So I would.
So you would do it.
I would blitz.
In the right spots. You wouldn't be.
I'm not coming in there every play blitzing. No. In certain spots, I would blitz. Yes.
All right.
So I agree with some parts of what Tyvis said. I disagree with a lot of what Tyvis said. And in that Cincinnati game without Jamar Chase, the Bengals went with a very short passing game.
Sure.
And that allowed the Browns secondary to play a lot closer to the line of scrimmage and kind of tackle them right after the catch, eliminate yards after catch. But what Miami does different than every other team in the league is they throw the ball downfield. Tyreek Hill doesn't just lead the league in average yards run per route at 4. That's the highest they've ever recorded in the NFL since they started tracking that stat in 2006. Jaylen Waddle's 3rd in the league. And when you look at some of these numbers, it's a little different with Hill and Waddle than it is with any other pair of receivers in the league based on speed. So I did my research.
Yeah, it looks like
Let me just run some numbers out to you guys to put in context how ridiculous what Hill and Waddle are doing this year.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill has 1,107 receiving yards.
Insane.
Now, he's on pace to break Calvin Johnson's single-season receiving record.
He's on pace to go over 2,000.
Yep. Now, people say, well, it's 17 games versus 16. How about this for a stat? Calvin Johnson in that season averaged 122.8 receiving yards per game.
This is the apples-to-apples number.
Tyreek Hill, 122.7. So
wow.
Exactly on pace. You know who's 3rd on that list, by the way? How about
Randy Moss?
Josh Gordon. The year in Cleveland was 117.6.
Well, he had a mammoth year.
When Tua is at quarterback, Tyreek Hill gets the ball on 38% of his pass attempts.
Wow.
That's 12% higher than any other single receiver gets targets in the league. It's absurd at how frequently they target him. And even
why wouldn't you? Nobody can cover him.
Impressive is where he's getting the most of his work. It's in the middle of the field. Hill and Waddle both run more routes, 9 to 19 yards down in the middle, where they're crossing the seams in between the numbers, than any other receiver in the league.
What do you make of that, Ty?
They're 2, and Cooper Kupp is 3. And let's pull up the passing chart for Tua real quick. This is, I think, the key to what's going to happen here. If you take a look at this, 14 of 15 of Tua's passing touchdowns have been to the middle to the left. He does not throw to the right, which is, as a lefty, across his body to the opposite side of the field.
Right. You would expect that to look like the chart to look like that.
But not that diverse. Not that strong where he's always throwing to his strong side. So I think if I'm the Browns defense, I'm sending the house to the left, making him roll out to the right, and try and throw across his body that side. Because look at the numbers. I mean,
well, that makes perfect sense. But I think, Tyvis, the reason I want you to talk to this, we know that with any left-handed quarterback. I mean, that's what you want to do with any left-handed quarterback. You want to get him away from his strength. It's like tennis. If a guy doesn't have a backhand, you're going to drive the backhand all day long. Can they do that?
They could do that, but I don't think they need to send a blitz. This will be one of those games where you have to I would put Jadeveon and Miles on the same side.
On the left side?
Yeah, I'll put him on the left side.
Right?
If that's the
to
case,
specifically push him to the right.
Exactly, to make him roll out to his spot. But what they'll do is, if that's the case, then they'll be like, you know what, let's just throw jailbreak to the other side, because if their best pass rusher is on this side, we're just going to work this side. So it's one of those things that I get it. You know what, you need to go be in the Browns front office because you're into this analytics.
I love numbers.
Yeah, you're into this
like
analytic things. But over the course of a game, Mike McDaniels is going to figure out, oh, snap, they're doing this, so let's just go ahead and adjust, which then Joe Woods will have to counter with some type of adjustment as well. Like I say, it's all about the pass rush this game. Yeah. If that pass rush gets home, I think you have to keep it balanced. If Miles is going to be on that side, all they're going to do is chip him or whatever. They're going to get the protection they need. Whether that's, like Leroy would say, we're just going to bring in an extra guy. We got to put Gesicki right there to chip Miles just to get that extra time. We'll do so. Yeah. So I don't think that's going to be that effective.
Bull, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I agree a lot of what Tyvis said, but Mike also made a good point. Tua is averaging over 9 yards per pass attempt. I don't know if you had that stat, Mike. You had so many stats, I can't remember.
I didn't say
Tua's
that
averaging
one.
over.
It was.
Excuse me. Yeah, most yards per pass thrown, right? So, like, what's his average in the air, essentially? And he's number 1 in the league, whereas Joe Burrow, who the comparison was, is number 8. Not that that's that low, but still, it is a significant difference. And Tua is number 1 by a lot. However, the Dolphins' offensive line is definitely not great. So I do think the Browns had success last week because the Bengals don't have a good offensive line. And, yeah, they did try to throw the ball short, but that was only because they couldn't protect Burrow. So, really, they had to get rid of it quickly. So, I think if the Browns can get some pressure on Tua by blitzing and being a little unpredictable, because until last week the Browns' pass rush has been predictable, then I think they can make things happen. However, the danger of that, of course, is if you don't get home, you're in big trouble because – and nobody, we could talk all day about who should guard Tyreek Hill. Ultimately, in a one-on-one matchup, if given time, Tyreek Hill is eventually going to come open. Mm-hmm. So if you are creative in blitz, which I think they should be, you have to get home. If you don't, that's when they hit you with those big plays. That's when it's happened all year. But I don't think you should totally give up on doing it and be scared to do it just because if you don't get there, it's going to be potentially a disaster.
Yeah, it's high risk, high reward.
Right.
It's high risk, high reward. When you send a lot of extra guys, you know one thing, and it's not like it's just any offense. You know that the best receiver in football is going to eventually become open. Mm-hmm. He just runs routes and gets open. That's what he does. 2 things. For whatever reason, it takes Joe Woods 7 or 8 weeks to figure out what the hell he's doing. We look back to last year, it was Jekyll and Hyde. It was the absolute one of the worst defenses in the NFL the first half of the year. And then it was like he found this magic switch in the dark, and just like that, the Browns became a top 5 defense. I believe he's doing the same thing this year. I don't know why. I have no idea why. Maybe he's studying his personnel. He's figuring out what he has, where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are. But I hope last week wasn't an aberration. That's my hope. I hope that what we saw last week out of the Browns defense is what we're going to see the rest of the year.
Yeah.
If we see that same defense that does blitz occasionally and gets home when they do so.
That's what I'm saying.
I think the Browns will win this football game.
Yeah,
I think it all comes down to one thing, to be honest, is Denzel Ward in uniform.
I agree with that, too.
If he's in street clothes, this is a hard L.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any other way to slice this. I don't see how the Browns defense, I think that had the Bengals had Chase, it would have been an entirely different football game.
I agree.
But them losing Chase and Denzel not being there was sort of a wash.
Mm-hmm.
If Denzel isn't on the football field, I just don't like their chances. If he plays, I think they win.
I agree with that, but that's not – you're right. But I'm not going to say that he's 100% the guy. The guy that needs to have a big game, in my personal opinion, is still Jadeveon Clowney, and I'm going to tell you why. I had this argument with a buddy of mine about his career, Jadeveon's career.
Yeah.
Technically,
you gonna name drop or no?
I'm not.
Okay.
Not. Okay. And when he said it, I was taken back by it. He said that Jadeveon, and I mean no disrespect. Actually, I'm not the one that said it, so it doesn't matter. But he said that Jadeveon Clowney could really be considered a bust. If you look at his stats from his career, his most productive season, he had 9.5 sacks.
Right.
Houston, he was not the number one DN. J.J. Watt was.
Absolutely right.
His next productive team was the Cleveland Browns. He's not the number one DN. Myles Garrett.
But,
so this guy is getting a lot of single coverage, and he's not becoming really
that was an
good.
argument I used to hear a lot with Simeon Rice when he played with Warren Sapp in Tampa. So, well, he's the benefactor of another.
Warren's in the middle.
No, I know, but it's another elite pass rusher.
Yeah.
But I don't agree with that. I would never classify Jadeveon Clowney as a bust.
That's what
Jay, I agree with you.
Okay.
Jay, I agree with you.
Bull. Tell us why.
To
Yeah,
me, because to me, a bust is Jamarcus Russell. That's Ryan Leaf.
Yep. You know what a
it's
bust
when a
looks
guy
like.
is
You know
right.
what one looks like.
Now, I think it's fair to say Jadeveon was not worth the first overall pick in the draft. He's not.
That's fair.
If you're the first pick in the draft, you should be a Hall of Famer. He's not going to be a Hall of Famer.
Absolutely
But he's
right.
good. He's not a great NFL player. He's a very good NFL player. He's not a great pass rusher. I think that we know. He is. If you look at the way he performs against the run, he's consistently been one of the best defensive ends against the run his entire career, and that has continued. So he's a good player, not a great player. To me, a bust is a guy who's a high pick and is out of the league or completely sucks.
Yeah.
And that's not the case with
Yeah,
Clowney.
bust is just way too strong.
That's why I said
Yeah.
bust.
Yeah, too
I was
strong.
like,
He's also been hurt a ton in his career, so
Yeah.
I've never
He
seen
has,
kinda
but
like the
but
full
listen,
development.
when
But-
you're deciding bust or not, you have to factor
Yeah.
that in. And
Yes.
in
He
his
hasn't been a
case,
bust. I agree.
in his case, Bull's absolutely right. Did he live up to the hype of being the top pick in the draft? Absolutely not. No question. Is he a bust? No. He's still in the league. He's been a productive player. Yes, he's played with some other really good players, but a lot of great players have. So I think that, look, if he plays the way he can play, this defense should be a top 5 defense.
Correct, and that's what I was leading to.
Right, so
on Sunday when they play, Miles is obviously they're going to have to compensate for Miles.
Yes.
He has to get the one-on-one, and he has to win. He has to win those matchups and really cause havoc back there for Tua. And I think that helps the pass team because Bull's right. You're not about to cover Tyreek Hill for 10 seconds. Like, no, you gotta limit the time Tua has the ball and the time he has to get rid of the ball. It should be 4 seconds at the absolute max.
Right.
Because when you're dealing with these receivers, that's all they really need anyway.
Bull, who's the key player in the game for the Browns defensively, in your view? Is it Denzel?
I would say. I just want to think about that for a second. I'll give you somebody else. A guy who played really well last week, Sione Takitaki.
He did play well.
I thought he had a major impact on the game last week, and I think Denzel Ward. I think stopping Tyreek Hill is a team effort. I don't think one guy can do that by himself. I think it's a team effort to stop these guys because the Dolphins are a weird team. They have these 2 great receivers, and then all their other skill position players are at best average. Their running backs are nothing. Their tight end's just a guy. The rest of their receivers are nothing. So there's 2 great players. We've talked a lot about this team, Jay, the Browns, being a studs and duds type of team. That's what the Dolphins' skill positions are, studs and duds to me. So
yeah, I agree
can
with
you
that.
team effort these 2 great receivers and just slow them down? You can't stop. You're not completely going to shut them out. But if you can slow them down a little bit as a team, and I think Sione Takitaki, a linebacker just going out there and making plays. I know Tyvis has talked about this a lot. DeQuell's talked about this a lot. We need linebackers that are just going to go out and just make a play.
Right.
And Taki did that a bunch of times against Cincinnati, and I think he fired up the rest of the defense. So when a linebacker's doing that, being disruptive, it makes a huge difference. And in a lot of ways, the Dolphins and Bengals are similar teams. They don't run the ball. They have a great, obviously Burrow's better than Tua, but Tua's playing better than Burrow overall this season. Both have great receiving talent. They're very one-dimensional. And against the Browns have played 3 one-dimensional teams. And 2 of them, or 3 teams that haven't run the ball a lot. I say the Steelers are one-dimensional. They're kind of zero-dimensional. But they beat the Steelers, who don't run it a lot, which sounds weird. They beat the Bengals, who don't run it a lot. They did lose to the Chargers. We all know that was a game they probably should have won, but they did lose. So the teams that don't run a lot, have struggled offensively. Justin Herbert did not have a great game against the Browns. For him, as good as he is, so he didn't play great again. None of the quarterbacks on the one-dimensional teams, even though the Chargers ran it well,
they ran it down
the quarterbacks on those one-dimensional teams did not have good games against the Browns. Yeah. And if that happens with Tua in this game, the Browns should be able to win because I think the Browns will be able to score.
Tim Couch is on. We're going to bring him on in 1 second. Before we do that, I want your reaction to Taki. When I watched him against the Bengals on Monday night, I literally thought I was looking at a different player. Mm-hmm. He looked like that impact playmaking linebacker that we have been thirsting for. And what was the difference to you? What are you seeing?
Well, to me, is what I've literally been saying for the last few weeks. I think that he's more in the box type of guy. See, Taki is the guy who they're using as a Sam. And at that Sam position, that's the more athletic linebacker who can play out in space. I think for him, he's more effective in the box. He showed that last week. I think JOK would be the guy that would be better suited for the Sam because of how athletic he is. He's not the biggest guy, and he can get around defenders and make those plays.
Right.
So I think him being in the box, he seemed very disciplined. His footwork was great, and he didn't miss any tackles.
He was great.
He seems super instinctual, too, and sometimes that could bite a player in the ass, and sometimes it leads to phenomenal performances like we saw against Cincinnati, where he had 13 tackles. And no matter where the Bengals are running with the ball, Taki was in the hole ready to make a play.
And that's what you want. That guy
does scare me a little bit with that instinctual free-flowing style against Miami, though, where there's so much motion pre-snap with Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, guys that you can't ignore in those pre-snap motions. Tyler Boyd goes in motion. Okay, you can have a step to catch up. Tyreek Hill goes in motion. You have to go with Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. Yeah. You're going to be too slow on the outside. So I'm not saying he worries me going to this game, but I'm really curious to see if he can replicate what he did against Cincinnati.
He's going to need
against the team that window dresses a lot more.
I'm interested to see where he plays. Will they put him in the box, or is JOK back now?
Have you noticed that they're using him differently?
I noticed last game, obviously, because JOK wasn't there, but for the most part, he's been at Sam. And like I say, to me, I think he's more of a in-the-box linebacker.
All right, very good.